Hello, good people of YouTube. Mountbatten here, and today I thought we'd talk about one of the most popular classes in game, battleships. Battleships are massive ships armed with huge guns and equipped with literally tons of armor. They're these awesome ships that you probably watched a lot of History Channel documentaries about growing up, like I did throughout junior high and high school. And, well, it's a slippery slope that you wind up, playing Wood Warships for 6 or 7 years because of. But anyway, because of their popularity, especially with newer players, I thought we'd do a short, simple, how not to suck at battleships guide for today's video. We're going to go over things like how you should build your battleship, what you need to know about your battleship, how to play your battleship, and some very, very useful do's and don'ts of playing battleships in today's video. You can check out the timeline down below for the relative chapters, but I would recommend you watch the whole thing, especially if you are a newer player. Even if you're an older player, just to pick up on some things that you may have missed in your time with World of Warships. But anyway, let's start out with, well, setting your battleship up with your proper builds. So, now, each battleship in-game is a little bit different from the last. So knowing what your battleship is of course half of the battle. But we're going to run through some generic builds that will definitely get you going in the right direction for sure, and then you can tune it according to your own battleship's unique characteristics. So I'm going to start out with the normal commander and module builds. So this is what a normal build looks like. This build emphasizes just good old tankiness and survivability, and this will work on 99.9% of battleships. Is it the most optimum build for 99.9% of battleships? Nope. But I promise you this is better than what a lot of other players are running on their battleships out there. And you will definitely get a lot of tankiness out of your battleship with this build. So it's a very safe build overall. Again, it builds into the survivability and tankiness of your ship, also the concealment, to make sure you can disengage when you need to disengage, because that is a huge part of what Warships going dark, when you need to go dark and run away. So up next are the secondary builds. Yes, hey, there are multiple of them. There are 2 to be exact. So this is your normal secondary build. As you can see we swapped out some of those modules for some of those main battery modules for secondary battery modules, getting the secondaries out and more accurate with these modules. And as you can see with Commander Skills 2, we've taken manual fire for secondaries along with the other secondary skill that increases the reload time and range of your secondary guns. The way manual fire for secondary works is that you click on a target by hitting Alt, and then your mouse will pop up in battle. You click on a target for your secondaries to focus on, and over the course of 54 seconds, your secondaries will build up to their maximum accuracy by keeping them on a single target. Then when you swap targets, that will drop their accuracy down to 80%, and it will build back up from there. Now, the first secondary build is if your secondaries can pin the common armor thresholds at your tier. So you can check out the little link in the description down below to the wiki page, which will tell you what's the common armor thresholds at your tier. For example, tier 8 plus, it's 32 millimeters of armor. So if you got something like the German 128 millimeter guns that you can find on the higher tier German battleships, you do not need IFHE because your secondaries can already pin that 32 millimeters of armor, which means that you will get a nice, good, consistent secondary damage income from your guns. Now the second build is, well, the IFHE secondary build. This is what you would use when your secondary guns cannot pin that common armor threshold at your tier. But if you take IFHE and they can pin those common armor thresholds, you absolutely want to do that. So this is, I know I said the German battleships in the first half of this this build section, but if you have the German battle cruisers, for example, theirs cannot. So you take IFHE, and now Schlieffen secondary guns can pin 32 millimeters of armor. Now, also with Schlieffen 2, you want to build into concealment as well, because Schlieffen's secondary range is the same as her concealment with a maximum concealment build, and that is excellent. That means that when you are detected, whatever it is that is spotting you, you can engage them with your secondary guns once they get spotted. So that's an awesome power to have. So again, knowing your ship, if your battleship can get their secondaries out to their concealment range, you absolutely want to make that happen by all means necessary. So going on from that and talking about knowing your ship, there are a couple of very unique builds you can put on your battleships. For example, the St. Vincent, because of how goofy and ridiculous that ship is, you could have this build, this Lighthouse this Lighthouse Fearless Brawler build, where you take all the commander skills that will increase your detection, that will increase the it's all about building to your DPM. So we have Adrenaline Rush, we have Fearless Brawler, where when you're on fire and flooding in multiple locations, you get a boost to your reload time. Because St. Vincent has her super heal, she doesn't really care about any of this because of how maneuverable and agile the ship is already. It can make the most out of this goofy build. But again, this is knowing your ship and knowing that the St. Vincent can do things like this. So this is something you can run on a St. Vincent. You just want to copy the build that you see up on the screen right now. But again, know your ship, know what you can and can't put on your ship. The two builds that I showed you, the main ones, the normal build and the secondary build, that will again get you going with a good solid build for any of those ships that can take those builds. With the normal build, that's most battleships. With the secondary build, again, you got to make sure you're in a secondary battleship, right? So you can't go slap that on like a Italian battleship and have a good time, because their 90mm secondary guns won't pin anything and they don't really have the range to do that. So you got to know your ship is what I'm saying. Now, speaking about the modules, there are a variety of unique upgrades you can fit on your battleships. Most tier 10 battleships, I should say, have a unique upgrade at this point. You can acquire them through the Research Bureau. So you do have to put in a little bit of grinding to regrind some lines in order to acquire them. But some of the best ones, and there'll be a link right here to my video on Battleship Unique Upgrades if you want a more in-detail rundown. But ones that I would say are 100% worth getting are the Yamato's Unique Upgrade, the Montana's Unique Upgrade, the GK's Unique Upgrade, and the Colombo's Unique Upgrade. Those are 4 that I would highly recommend you pick up if you enjoy playing any of those ships. They are 100% worth it, in my humble opinion. Now, speaking of commanders, there are again a number of unique commanders in game. Most of them are well worth acquiring to slap on your battleship. They have certain skills and traits that are excellent for your battleships. For example, Lucian's. If you play any German ship, Lucian's is great for him because, especially with battleships, his secondary skill, where you only have to get 100 secondary hits, and now you get a buff to your secondary reload time, is absolutely amazing for, well, the Preußen line or for the Schlieffen line. So definitely look into those unique commanders too. Most of them can be acquired through Cole, either through direct purchase or through a very roundabout way. And here's a link to that video here for a more in-depth explanation of the unique commanders that we have in game. Alright, going on to our second point, knowing your ship kind of goes hand in hand with the first point. But like I was talking about in the module builds, I gave you some pretty general module builds that will work on most battleships, but yes, you can and should fine-tune them for whatever battleship it is that you're playing. So where do you get this information at? Because information is power in World of Warships. Well, starting out with what makes a battleship, the armor. Armor is easy enough found in game. You can, go into port, click the little drop-down menu that shows you the ship's armor, and there you can look at your ship's armor and see what's going on with it. And this is something you should very much be familiar with a battleship, because your armor is, again, what makes you a battleship. You need to know, where your armor is strong at, where is it weak at, so you can figure out, what part you want to kind of invite the enemy team to try and shoot. Make your broadside look a little appealing, because your extremities are not that well armored. I mean, you should be doing that anyway, because your extremities really aren't that well armored unless you're like the Kremlin, right? So knowing your armor, knowing where your citadel's at. The citadel is the portion of your ship that if the enemy gets their shells into your citadel, you are going to lose a lot of HP, because that is the juicy bit of your ship where all the important bits are kept at. In real life, it's got like the engine, the engineering spaces, the CIC, the magazines, again, all the really important stuff in your ship that you don't want giant shells penetrating, right? So you need to be aware of where that's at and how much armor is either in front of it or how much armor isn't in front of it, and what you need to do in order to keep that part of your ship safe. And also be sure to check out your deck armor too to see if, again, you have armor that's thicker than the common threshold at your tier. That way you know how much HE you can and can't take. French battleships, for example, are absolutely coated in 32 millimeters of armor everywhere, so that means that they're not very good at sustaining their existence under continued HE spam. Soviet battleships, by counterpoint, have some nice and thick deck armor, usually the mid deck, so they can sustain existence under HE spam a lot better than French battleships, just for example. The second thing you need to know are, of course, your ship's stats. You need to know, well, what makes your ship your ship. You need to know your gun reload time. You need to know your top speed, your maneuverability. Most of these stats can be found in game, the ones you really need to worry about anyway. That can all be found in the drop-down menu. So you should definitely be perusing that and seeing, what makes your ship your ship. But kind of getting into our third point under this talking point, there are some characteristics that aren't outright, I should say not really outright, they're not clearly explained what exactly is going on with them in game. Believe it or not, this game does look fairly simple on the surface, but there is a lot going on behind the scenes, especially when it comes to guns. And of course, battleships are all about guns. So there are many numbers behind your guns and your shells, besides the handful that you see in game. In game, you can see the initial velocity for the guns for the shells coming out the tubes of your guns. You can also see the the dispersion of the guns, the maximum dispersion, and like your shells damage and such. But what you don't see is, well, things like air drag coefficient, Krupp, and a number of other numbers. You can find all of these at third-party websites like ShipTool. So air drag, for example, is a very important thing. It's how fast your shells essentially slow down as they fly through the air. Some battleship shells slow down a lot as they fly through the air, like the American and the British battleship shells, which means at range it takes, well, longer for the shells to get there. You got to lead the target more, and they don't pack quite the same level of punch as they do at longer ranges as they do at closer ranges, which means those ships are generally best played from medium to close range. Soviet shells, especially those of like the Slava, have excellent air drag coefficients, which means that they zip through the air and they carry their penetrating power at range much better than those other shells. So you need to check that out and see, where should I really be playing this ship based upon the shell velocity, well, on the shell characteristics and such. Krupp is also basically how tough the shell is and how good it can penetrate, and how well, I should say, it can penetrate into enemy armor. So again, you find that all on ShipTool. Now, ShipTool is a good place to see all the numbers and such. There's a lot more numbers involved in with the shells and stuff, but those are like kind of the main ones you need to check out just to get a pretty good idea of what your shells are like. But for you hands-on learners, the training room is completely free to use. Everything we talked about can be, of course, viewed in action in the training room. The training room is a neat place where you can go, you can select any map that's in the game, you can select any ship that you have in your port, and you can go and sell it around in the training room. You can spawn in any of the Techline ships in game for you to shoot to see, how well your guns are going to penetrate their armor, and you can kind of figure out where you need to hit the ship in order to, hit the sweet zone in order to citadel the enemy ship. But we can also, of course, kind of see how your ship performs, and you can take pot shots from across the map to see how long your shells are going to take to get there, and see just how good your dispersion pattern is with your guns, because that's another thing they don't really tell you in game. Believe it or not, each individual line has their own unique dispersion pattern for the main battery guns. Although the American dispersion pattern has kind of been shared amongst the German battleships now, I believe the British battleships also have the American dispersion pattern, or a pattern that's similar to the American dispersion pattern. So you can check out all that stuff in the training room. It costs you nothing to use. You will not expend any flags. You will not have to pay a single credit to use the training room. It's completely free. It's a great place to go to kind of put around in your battleship, get an idea of, like its top speed, how it handles, the gun characteristics, how long the turrets take to rotate. So definitely know, if you buy a new ship, I would highly recommend just going, play with it in the training room for a bit to get to get a pretty good idea of what this ship is and how it operates and such. But going into battle, how should you play your battleship? Well, again, depends upon what your battleship is and its characteristics, but a general idea of what you should be doing. Again, general, fine-tune this for your own ship, right? So, generally, you should start off the match by being towards the back of the pack. I mean, the game does spawn you in third from the front. The only ones behind you are carriers. And as the match starts, and as you choose what flank you're going to go to, I would generally, put around at like half speed until you see what the team's doing. If your team's going strong to one flank and, one flank's going to be a little weak, I generally go to the weak flank to give them some battleship support, because typically most battleships kind of like to lemming train to one side. But, if there's like a cruiser and a destroyer going out there by themselves, I'll go to give them some battleship support, because you'd be surprised, a cruiser and a destroyer and a battleship working and playing together is far better than 5 other ships that aren't working and playing together. They're all playing for their own greed, right? They're not coordinating targets and stuff. You would be surprised how many ships 3 coordinated players can hold off. So if you are going off by yourself, make sure you type in and be like, hey guys, what's the plan? Just get some communication going. And again, you'd be surprised how much better you're off than half of the enemy team. But anyway, so once you decide where you're going, as you are traveling to your location, look for opportunistic cross shots at the start of the match. Now, again, depending upon what ship you're in, obviously the Yamato is much better for sniping than like the Preußen or the GK. So, again, know your ship, know what ranges you should open up, and know when you're kind of just wasting shots or getting yourself spotted for no good reason. So, but when you do see a good opportunistic cross shot, take it. That's what battleships, it's one of the things battleships are meant to do, especially on unsuspecting targets across their map. Now, once you get to the location, whatever cap or flank that you're going on, your goal is now to support the destroyers and cruisers that are fighting over the caps. How do you do this? Well, you target any ships that are attacking them, even other destroyers. I know destroyers don't have a whole lot of HP, battleship guns aren't that accurate, and, well, you take a long time to reload in comparison to other classes, but every single HP point you get off of the enemy team destroyer is one less HP point that they have. And it's 1 HP point closer to them being sunk. And so many matches are determined by whose destroyers live and whose destroyers don't. So you want to make sure your destroyers are surviving for as long as they can, while the enemy team's destroyers are, well, not. And this also comes down to ammo selection too. If you are on a flank that is fairly destroyer heavy, let's say there's 3 enemy destroyers on that flank, and they're all, fighting over the cap, you do want to keep your HE loaded, because your HE is far better for dealing with destroyers than your AP. Your AP is just going to overpin the destroyer. It's going to do a menial amount of damage. Meanwhile, the HE won't overpin, going to do more damage, and it'll be breaking their modules, making their life absolutely miserable. So if your flank is destroyer heavy and they're getting spotted, by all means, do load HE and use it. So that's what you want to do. You want to support your destroyers and support your cruisers by murdering the ships that are trying to murder them, and also being there to tank for them. You have far more HP than they do. You have far thicker armor than they do. So you want to be there to tank for your friendly ships, which means not sitting all the way in the back. In most cases, again, know your ship, know how it's meant to be played, but you do want to be, attracting attention to yourself away from your cruisers and your destroyers so they can do their thing and you can do your thing later on. So anyway, as the match progresses, you should move with your team. You don't want to just be sitting there sniping the back of the map by yourself. That's 1, how you get targeted by CVs and submarines, and 2, unless you're in something like a Slava, you're probably not really doing much for your team that way. Now, if you're draining 3s and you're obliterating ships, again, like a Slava or a Bungo, by all means, carry on. But for the most part, you want to be moving with your team. You mainly want to be there to counter the enemy team's battleships, so you kind of want to mirror what they're doing, right? So you want to be there for your team, so your team can be there for you. You can tank the AP and HE spam far better than your cruisers or destroyers can. So be there for them so they can be there for you. Now, ammo selection too, like I said with destroyers, is very important. If you do have a battleship that doesn't have main battery guns that are of a large enough caliber to overmatch the enemy battleship's extremities, like say, like a Montana, and the enemy Yamato is face tanking you, by all means, load up HE and start burning that guy down. AP is cool and all, but if you're getting bounces and ricochets, it's not doing anything. Meanwhile, the HE will be starting fires and getting damage because it can at least penetrate the enemy ship's armor and will do damage and such. If you're Italian, just spam sap at everything. You'll be fine, right? But anyway, now, in many a situation you're probably going to be in, when the flank absolutely collapses, what you want to do is basically ensure that the enemy team is paying for the map that they are taking from your team. So of course you want to kite, which means you turn out from the enemy team, you angle into them as best you can, and then you just start farming them down and making them pay for all the water that they are taking away from your team. Now, of course, use your armor, angle, play smart. This is where having a nice concealment range comes into play here, right? Because if some things do get a little bit too hairy for you, you can just, rack your guns, go dark, and sail away from the enemy team. Again, to what degree can you do this? Know your ship, know what it can do, and know what it can't do. And the best way you can do this is by getting experience with your ship, right? So putting in the matches, you can figure out quite a lot from, of course, again, playing in a training room or even playing in co-op for a bit, just to get an idea of like what your ship can and can't do. But a lot of this does come down to experience. Again, everything that I'm telling you here today is very general because, well, there's so many ships in game. I've made guides for individual lines in the past, but this is again a general guide on what you need to do. And again, if you follow this guide, you'll be doing far better than most battleships that I see in game today. All right, so some do's and don'ts of battleships. First off, your damage con and your heal. You definitely want to be balancing these, unless you're the Valparaiso. What I mean by balancing your heal and your damage con, you want one to be available at pretty much at any time. Why? Well, fires and floods suck. They suck a lot. It's damage over time. There's nothing you can really do about it once they get set. You just gotta let it ride out unless you have damage con available. That, of course, will instantly stop it. But if you, pop your damage con and then you pop your heal right after, well, first off, with your heal, you want to make sure you're not wasting your heal. You'll see your ship icon down there. There's that gray bar that indicates how much of your ship HP can be restored. You'll notice that at one point it will stop growing and it will start to shrink with your ship's HP. That means that is the maximum amount of healing you can get back from a single heal. When you see that happens, pop your heal. You're good to go. Now going back to your damage con. Damage con is very important in today's World of Warships. It stops fires, it stops floodings, it stops the submarine pings, so it is a very important consumable. So you want to make sure that you either have a damage con or a heal available. Now, of course, heal does regenerate your ship's HP, so it's probably the thing you're going to be using more often. And damage con, if you are above 75% HP, you've got one fire burning, you're a battleship, right? You've got way more HP than most other ships on the map. You can afford to let that one fire burn. It's not going to hurt that much, and of course you can just pop a heal and get it back, because 100% of fire and flooding damage is recoverable by your heal, so it's not that big of a deal. Now, if you get two fires, that's a different story, right? But you want to make sure you're not popping it too soon. Because if you do pop it for one fire, and you're still visible to the enemy ship that is setting you on fire, well, they're going to say thank you, and they're going to really focus you down and try to get a couple more fires on you, because now they know any fires or floodings that they get set on your ship now are going to stick and burn for the full duration of their burn time. This also goes back to our first battleship build. It's why we build so much into all the consumables, all the modules and all the commander skills that decrease the amount of damage that fires do to you, because you are going to be the focus of a lot of HE spam because you have thick armor in order to ensure that AP can't get through it. But HE can still set fires, right? So kind of throwing it back to that. But anyway, so yeah, you want to make sure you're not wasting your damage con, okay? Again, general guide, if you're at 75% or above HP, 1 fire, even 2 in some cases, just let it burn. If you're at half HP, I would start to damage con those single fires if you can break away from line of sight fairly easily by doing so. But 2 fires or more, definitely damage con that. If your HP's in the red, you just gotta damage con everything because you ain't got the HP to spare. So make sure you're balancing your heals and your damage con. You're not just popping them off at the first instance of damage. That's a good way to waste them and find yourself sunk even faster. Secondly, don't sell in a straight line. I know battleships are slow. You want to get to where you're going, but selling in a straight line is an excellent way to find yourself getting dev struck by a Slava or a Bungo sitting in the back of the map, and also it's a good way to find yourself getting torpedoed by an entire wall of torpedoes. The amount of times still today I see tier 10 battleship players selling in a straight line and then absolutely raging in chat when they eat a wall of Shimakaze torpedoes, it is hilarious, and it's actually kind of sad at the same time. So by not selling in a straight line, you are, turning to port, turning to starboard every now and then. Now, if you are, completely undetected, that's one thing, right? If you're undetected and you're just getting from point A to point B, by all means, go in a straight line, get there as fast as possible. But if you are detected, play with your rudder, play with your speed a little bit, just a little bit to the port, a little bit to starboard. You'd be surprised how much that will throw off enemy players' shots and how much that will make torpedo boats rage at your existence. If you don't believe me, go try and play a torpedo boat and you'll see what I'm talking about. So don't sell in a straight line, avoid getting citadeled, avoid eating walls of torpedoes. And then thirdly, submarines, my favorite class, especially after yesterday's video. Dealing with subs, how do you deal with them with a battleship? Well, battleships are actually in a pretty good spot because they get the 2-kilometer cutoff for the submarine homing. So generally, the best thing you do is not be alone when you come across a submarine player. You want to have, some cruisers and destroyers with you. Again, be there for your team so they can be there when you really need them to be there. But the best thing you can do is play with your throttle, and when those torpedoes are about 2.5 kilometers away, turn your ship hard over one way or another and hit the brakes, and the torpedoes will go flying on by because they're still trying to track your ship as if it was going, the speed it was going when they were 2 kilometers away. But if you dump all your speed and turn out, then you will throw them off. You also want to be very, I don't want to say conservative, but be very wise with your airstrikes. You don't want to just dump both airstrikes where you think the submarine player is going to be at. Because that first airstrike, if you hit them, that's going to force them to use their damage con in order to stop the oil leak. Once they do that, if you can follow that up with a second airstrike, now that oil leak is going to be applied to them permanently, and you're going to have a far better idea with that oil leak than you will with that stupid little ping indicator on where the submarine player is at. And then you'd follow it up with, a third airstrike, because by the time you got your second one out and the submarine's leaking oil, your airstrike should be recharged. Hit them with the third one, and now you should be doing some good solid damage to them. The best thing I can say is make sure you have some friends nearby. If it is just you and the submarine, it is time to fall back and find some friends. Fourthly, dealing with CVs kind of goes hand in hand with dealing with submarines. Try not to be alone as best as you can. This is a team game. If you are alone by yourself, especially being in a battleship, well, the CVs are absolutely looking for you because you're the thing they can kick to death over and over and over again, right? So you want to make sure you have some friends around. But if you are alone and dealing with a CV, what you do want to do is make sure when you are focusing the CV's planes, make sure you are sending your AA. You're focusing your AA on the opposite side of the ship that they are attacking, unless it's something like the Nakhimov. Because most CV planes, they are of course going to fly over your ship after they attack you, and they're going to spend more time in the opposite side of the side that they attacks AA, because they have to fly around and come back around and attack you again, and you'll be doing more damage and preventing further strikes by focusing your AA on that side. When it comes to DFAA, however, when you do pop it, you want to make sure that you're popping it when they're fully in your AA ring, because so many times I see a battleship player, if they have DFAA, the planes will just fly into their ring a little bit, they'll pop it, and they give the CV player enough time to get out of it. So make sure they're in your AA bubble by a good bit. Then you want to pop your DFAA and again focus the opposite side of what they're attacking once they cross the threshold of your ship. I'm not saying when they come into your AA bubble, instantly focus the opposite side that they're attacking, but once they cross that halfway point of your ship, focus that side. If you got DFAA going and the planes are stuck on that side of your ship, you should take a fair amount of their planes with you, even if they try to F out and get their planes out of there. Also, you want to make smart calls when dodging CV munitions, especially torpedoes. A lot of times, you're faced with a choice. It's either eat the CV torpedoes or go broadside to the enemy team. Sometimes it's better to eat the CV torpedoes than going broadside to the enemy team, because sure, the CV torpedoes are going to hurt, but the 2 or 3 enemy battleships that are staring at your battleship, waiting to see if you're going to turn out of those CV torps and show them broadside, they're going to do a lot more damage than those CV torps. Again, it's going to hurt either way. There's just lots of cases in this game where you got to make the call, do I want it to hurt more or do I want it to hurt a little less? So, again, you're not going to be able to preserve your ship's paint, is what I'm saying. You're a battleship. You're made to take damage. You're made to be playing, up there with your team in most cases. So you're going to have to make some calls on getting hurt a little bit less or a little bit more. There's no way you can completely preserve your battleship in a perfect state until the end. A full health battleship with a fresh paint job probably hasn't been doing their job at the end of the match, right? So what I'm saying is, you're made to get in there, take hits, and get damaged. So make sure when you're doing so, you are, of course, taking it in exchange from the enemy team's HP pool. So guys, that is my How Not to Suck at Battleships guide, getting a generic overview of how you can better yourself as a newer Battleship player. So let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Any tips for newer Battleship players, share that with us in the comments down below. Hope you guys enjoyed. Have a wonderful Wednesday, wonderful rest of your week. Hope to catch you guys in the next one.